You don't lose power all at once. You lose it the moment you say something you shouldn't. Think about this. You tell someone something personal, and later you wish you never said it. It doesn't happen instantly. At first, it feels like connection, like you're being honest, open, real. But then something shifts. The way they look at you changes. The way they respond changes. And suddenly, something that felt right in the moment becomes something you can't take back. Because once something is said, you lose control over how it's used. Most people don't overshare because they're weak. They do it because, deep down, they want to be understood. But what feels like honesty is often just a subtle way of asking for approval from people who haven't earned that access. And the truth is, most people think they're being open when they're actually being careless. Stoicism doesn't teach you to hide. It teaches you to be selective, because in a world where everyone talks, the one who controls what they reveal stays in control. And today, you'll learn the 7 things you should never share. And chances are, you've already shared some of them. 1. Your plans. Why talking feels like progress. You ever notice how good it feels to tell someone what you're about to do? Not after you've done it. Before. You say it out loud and suddenly it feels real. Like you've already taken the first step. A guy I knew had this exact habit. Solid guy, disciplined, thoughtful, not the type to quit easily. One night he told a few people he was launching a side business. He had everything mapped out, timeline, pricing, even how he'd scale it. People leaned in. That's a great idea. You're going to do well with that. You could see it on his face, that quiet satisfaction, not loud, but enough. A week passed. Nothing. A month passed. Still nothing. He didn't fail because he lacked discipline. He failed because he talked too much about what he was going to do. Here's what most people miss. When you speak your plans, your brain rewards you, not for doing the work, but for talking about it. It gives you a small sense of completion, like you've already made progress. But you haven't. You've just released the tension that would have forced you to act. And once that tension is gone, so is the urgency. Be honest. How many things have you talked about, but never finished? That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. And it gets worse when other people are involved. Because the moment you say it out loud, your plan is no longer just yours. It gets filtered through opinions, doubts, reactions. Some people question you. Some give advice. Some just look at you differently. And without realizing it, you shift. You start explaining instead of building. You adjust instead of executing. You think about how it sounds instead of how it works. That's where most ideas die. Not in failure, but in conversation. There's also something deeper happening here. Talking about your plans doesn't just feel good. It creates an identity. For a moment, you get to feel like the disciplined one, the focused one, the person who's about to level up. But that version of you hasn't been earned yet. And the more you talk about it, the less pressure you feel to become it. Talking becomes a substitute for doing. From a Stoic perspective, this is a loss of control. Not because other people stop you, but because you gave away the one thing that mattered most, your internal drive. The Stoics didn't announce their intentions. They acted, quietly, repeatedly, without needing anyone to witness the process, because they understood something most people don't. The moment you stop needing others to know, you start becoming someone who actually does. So the next time you feel the urge to tell someone your plan, pause. Ask yourself, are you sharing this to move forward or to feel like you already have? Because those are two very different things. And confusing them is how most people stay stuck. 2. Your weaknesses. When honesty becomes leverage, and this is where it gets more subtle, because if talking about your plans gives away your momentum, then talking about your weaknesses can give away something even more valuable, your position. Not long ago, there was someone at a workplace. Quiet, capable, not the loudest person in the room, but respected. Over time, he started opening up more. Nothing dramatic, just small things. He mentioned he struggled with pressure. Said he sometimes overthinks decisions, admitted he wasn't great with confrontation. It felt harmless, honest even. People nodded, listened. Some even related. But a few weeks later, something shifted. In meetings, he got interrupted more. When decisions came up, people second-guessed him, subtly at first. And when tension rose, someone else would step in, as if he couldn't handle it. No one attacked him directly, but they adjusted how they saw him. And that changed everything. Here's the part most people misunderstand. Vulnerability is powerful, but only in the right environment. In the wrong one, it doesn't create connection. It creates definition. The moment people hear your weaknesses, they start building a version of you around them. Not always consciously, but consistently. You're no longer just capable. You're capable, and that but follows you. This is where the confusion comes in. We've been taught that being open is always a strength, that honesty builds trust, that showing your struggles makes you more human. And sometimes that's true. But what people don't tell you is this: there's a difference between being understood and being exposed. Being understood happens when trust is earned, slowly, mutually, over time. Exposure happens when you reveal something to someone who hasn't proven they can hold it. And once that line is crossed, you can't take it back. Because information about you doesn't just sit there. It gets used, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unconsciously, but always in a way that affects how people interact with you. From a Stoic perspective, this isn't about closing yourself off. It's about understanding what is within your control and what isn't. You can't control how people interpret your words. You can't control how they use what you reveal, but you can control when, how, and to whom you say it. And that matters more than most people think. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you share your weaknesses too early, you're not just giving someone information. You're giving them a reference point, a place to test, a place to push, a place to see how you react. And the moment someone knows where you're unsure, they know where you're easier to influence. That's not connection, that's leverage. The Stoics understood this well. They didn't deny their flaws. They studied them, worked on them, strengthened them internally. But they didn't broadcast them to the world because they knew not everyone would use that knowledge with integrity. So the next time you feel the urge to open up, pause. Ask yourself, has this person earned access to this part of me? Or am I just trying to feel understood by someone who hasn't proven they can understand? Because those are two very different things, and confusing them can quietly shift the way the world sees you without you even realizing it. 3. Your triggers. The parts of you don't control, and if your weaknesses can change how people see you, your reactions can change how they use you, because nothing gives away control faster than predictable emotion. There was a guy at a gym I used to go to. Strong, disciplined, clearly put in the work, but he had one problem. He couldn't hide when something got under his skin. It didn't take long for people to notice. One comment about his form, he'd tense up. A joke about his progress, you could see it hit him instantly. Even something small, someone taking his equipment, he'd react just a little too fast. Not explosive, just readable. And once people see that, something shifts. At first, it's accidental. Someone teases him again, gets the same reaction. Then again, same result. After a while, it's not accidental anymore. Now it's intentional, not always malicious, but deliberate. Because they've figured something out. They know exactly which buttons to press. That's the part most people miss. Your triggers aren't just emotional responses. They're instructions. They tell people what gets to you, what distracts you, what throws you off balance. And once someone understands that, they don't need to control the situation. They just need to control you. Most people think control is about dominance. Who's louder, stronger, more assertive. But real control is much quieter than that. It's about who stays steady when everything around them is trying to pull them off center. Because the moment your emotions become predictable, your behavior becomes predictable. And predictable behavior is easy to manipulate. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. People don't need to be smarter than you to influence you. They just need to be more aware of your reactions than you are. Let that sink in. You could be more capable, more disciplined, more intelligent. But if someone knows how you react under pressure, they can still steer you. Not by force, by timing. From a Stoic perspective, this is one of the clearest losses of power, not because you feel something. That part is human, but because you reveal it instantly, without control. The Stoics never said, "Don't feel." They said, "Understand the space between stimulus and response." That space is where your power lives. And most people give it away without even noticing. They react too quickly. They speak too soon. They let the outside world decide their internal state. And once that pattern is seen, it gets used. So the goal isn't to become emotionless. It's to become unreadable in your reactions. To feel everything, but show nothing you don't choose to show. Because the moment people can't predict how you'll respond, they lose the ability to control the outcome. So next time something hits you, pause, not to suppress it, but to own it, because the first person who should understand your reactions is you, not the people watching you. And once you take that control back, you stop being someone who reacts to the world. You become someone the world can't easily move. 4. Your kindness. When being good starts costing you, and once people can read your reactions, the next thing they start testing is something even quieter, your limits, because kindness, when it's visible, gets measured. There was a woman I worked with years ago, reliable, thoughtful, the kind of person everyone liked. If something needed to be done, she'd step in. If someone needed help, she was there. No hesitation. At first, people appreciated it. They'd say thank you. They'd acknowledge her effort. But over time, something shifted. Requests became expectations. Hey, can you handle this? Can you stay a bit longer? Can you take this off my plate? And she kept saying yes. Not because she was weak, but because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. Months passed, and one day she said no, just once. And the reaction wasn't gratitude for everything she had done. It was confusion, even a little frustration, because in their minds, she had set a pattern. That's the part most people don't see coming. Kindness doesn't just show who you are, it teaches people how to treat you. And when there are no limits, people don't see generosity, they see availability. Here's the twist most people struggle with. The more consistently you give without boundaries, the less valuable your giving becomes. Not because people are bad, but because humans adapt quickly. What used to feel like effort becomes normal. What used to feel like help becomes expected. And once something is expected, it stops being respected. That's how quiet resentment builds. Not from what you refuse to give, but from what you keep giving without being asked to. From a Stoic perspective, this isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about understanding that your time, your energy, your attention, these are resources. And anything given without intention will eventually be taken without appreciation. There's also something deeper happening here. When you don't define your limits, you're not just being kind, you're avoiding discomfort. The discomfort of saying no. The discomfort of being misunderstood. the discomfort of not being liked by everyone, so instead, you say yes, again and again, until your kindness starts costing you your peace. And by then, it's harder to pull back, because people aren't reacting to who you are. They're reacting to what you've trained them to expect. That's the real shift, not in them, in the pattern. The Stoics understood this well. They believed in kindness, but not at the expense of self-respect. They helped when it aligned with their values. They gave when it was intentional. But they didn't sacrifice themselves just to maintain approval. Because approval is unstable, and once your actions are driven by it, you lose control of your own decisions. So the goal isn't to give less, it's to give with awareness. To understand that every yes you offer is shaping how people see you, and every no you avoid is shaping how much they take from you. So the next time someone asks for something, pause, not to reject them, but to check yourself. Are you saying yes because you want to, or because you don't want to deal with what happens if you don't? Because those two things feel similar, but they lead to very different lives. And once you see that clearly, you stop being someone who is always available and start becoming someone who is actually respected. 5. Your past, when your story becomes a cage. And once people start expecting things from you, the next thing they quietly hold on to is who you used to be. Because the moment you tell your story, you're not just sharing information, you're giving people a reference point. I remember a guy who joined a new company, sharp, focused, clearly capable. No one knew much about him at first, and that worked in his favor. He moved fast, made good decisions, built respect without saying much. Then one night, after a few drinks with co-workers, he opened up, talked about how he used to struggle, how he messed up in a previous job, how he almost got fired once. It was honest, real, human. People listened, some even related. But something changed after that. Subtle at first. In meetings, his ideas were questioned just a bit more. When pressure hit, people hesitated to rely on him. Not openly, but enough to feel it. Nothing he said that night was false, but it didn't stay in the past. It followed him into the present. That's the part most people don't expect. You may have outgrown your past, but once you give it to others, they don't update it as fast as you do. They anchor you to it, not because they're trying to hold you back, but because that's how the mind works. People don't see you as a moving process. They see you as a story. And once that story is defined, it becomes the lens they use to interpret everything you do. That's the trap. Because every time you explain your past, you reinforce it. You make it more real. Not just to them, but to yourself. And slowly, without noticing, you start acting in alignment with that version of you. Not who you are now, but who you once were. That's why talking about your past can feel relieving, but still keep you stuck. It gives you a reason, a context, an identity that explains everything, but it also limits everything. From a Stoic perspective, this is a subtle loss of control. Not because your past defines you, but because you let it define how others respond to you. And once that happens, you're no longer just moving forward. You're moving forward while being pulled backward. The Stoics didn't deny their past. They learned from it. But they didn't keep presenting it to the world, especially in environments where it could be used to reduce their authority, because they understood something simple. What you reveal repeatedly becomes how you're remembered, and what you're remembered as shapes what you're allowed to become. So the goal isn't to hide your story, it's to stop leading with it, to let your current actions speak louder than your previous mistakes. Because the more you explain who you used to be, the harder it is for people to see who you are now. So the next time you feel the urge to tell your story, pause. Ask yourself, is this helping me move forward? or just helping others understand where I've been. Because those are not the same. And one of them quietly keeps you anchored, while the other allows you to evolve. And once you understand that difference, you stop being someone who is explained by their past and start becoming someone defined by their present. 6. Your next move. Why saying it too early weakens it. And once people start seeing you through your past, the next thing they try to anticipate is what you're about to do next. Because the moment your next move becomes visible, it stops being fully yours. I knew someone who was about to make a big shift, leave a stable job and start something on his own. Not a reckless decision. He'd thought it through, saved money, built a quiet plan on the side. At first, he kept it to himself. Everything moved smoothly. Then one day he mentioned it, just casually. "Yeah, I'm thinking of leaving soon, starting my own thing." People reacted instantly. Some were supportive. Some were skeptical. Some started asking questions he hadn't even considered yet. "Are you sure it's the right time? What if it doesn't work? Why not wait a little longer?" None of it sounded negative on the surface. But something shifted. The certainty he had started to blur. The plan that once felt clear became crowded with other people's voices. Weeks passed. He didn't move. Not because the plan was bad, but because it was no longer clean. That's the part most people underestimate. The more people know your next move, the more mental noise you introduce into it. And that noise doesn't just stay external, it becomes internal. You start replaying conversations, reevaluating decisions, second-guessing instincts that were once clear, not because you lack judgment, but because you've allowed too many perspectives to mix into something that needed focus. Here's the twist most people don't see. Explaining your next move often replaces committing to it. It feels like progress, it feels like you're refining the plan, but in reality, you're diluting it. Because every time you explain, you open the door for interpretation, and interpretation leads to hesitation. From a Stoic perspective, this is a quiet but critical mistake. Not everything needs to be explained, especially not before it's done. The Stoics believed in action over declaration. They didn't feel the need to announce direction. They moved, adjusted, learned, and only then allowed results to speak. Because they understood something simple. Clarity comes from execution, not from discussion. There's also a deeper layer to this. When you talk about your next move, you're not just sharing information, you're exposing your timing. And once your timing is visible, it can be interrupted. Sometimes by doubt, sometimes by competition, sometimes by people who simply move differently once they know what you're doing. Not always intentionally, but enough to matter. That's why silence isn't secrecy, it's strategy. It protects the one thing most people lose too early, their ability to move without interference. So the goal isn't to isolate yourself, it's to recognize that not every stage of your life is meant to be seen in real time. Some things are better built before they're revealed. So the next time you feel the urge to explain what you're about to do, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing this to move forward, or am I looking for reassurance before I act? Because those are not the same, and one of them keeps you in motion, while the other quietly keeps you where you are. And once you see that clearly, you stop being someone who announces their next move and start becoming someone who simply makes it. 7. Your inner peace. The moment you expose it, you risk losing it. And after your next move, there's one thing even more personal people begin to notice. Not what you do, not what you say, but what makes you feel at peace, because once that becomes visible, it becomes vulnerable. I remember someone who finally got his life into a place that felt stable, nothing flashy, just a rhythm that worked. He had his routine, a few close people, time to think, time to reset. You could tell he wasn't chasing anything anymore. He was calm. At some point, he started sharing more of that. The habits that grounded him. The things that made him feel balanced. The way he structured his days to stay focused. Again, nothing wrong with that. But over time, something subtle changed. People started pulling on that space. Why don't you come out more? You're always doing your own thing. Relax a little. You're too structured. Small comments, nothing aggressive. But they added up. His routine got interrupted. His time got negotiated. His peace slowly became something that had to be explained. And that's where it shifted. What was once internal became external. What was once stable became influenced. That's the part most people don't realize. The more you expose what brings you peace, the more you invite the world to interact with it. Not always negatively, but inevitably. Because once people see it, they relate to it, question it, challenge it, reshape it. And over time, you start adjusting. Just a little, then a little more, until one day, the thing that once grounded you no longer feels the same. Here's the deeper truth. Peace is strongest when it's private, not hidden out of fear, but protected out of understanding. Because the moment your inner state depends on external validation, it stops being stable. It becomes reactive. From a Stoic perspective, this is one of the most important things to guard. Not your reputation, not your image, your inner world. Because everything else can shift. But if your inner state is intact, you remain steady. The Stoics didn't display their peace. They cultivated it quietly. They built routines, disciplines, perspectives that kept them grounded. But they didn't feel the need to constantly explain or justify them to others. Because they knew, the more something is exposed, the more it becomes affected. And peace, by nature, is fragile when it's constantly interacted with. There's also something subtle that happens when you talk about your peace. You start defining it in ways that can be measured, compared, even judged. And once that happens, you're no longer just living it, you're managing it. That's where it loses its depth. So the goal isn't to withdraw from life. It's to recognize that not everything meaningful needs to be visible. Some things are meant to stay internal. Not because they're weak, but because they're too important to be shaped by everything around you. So the next time you feel the urge to explain what keeps you grounded, pause. Ask yourself, is this something that needs to be understood by others, or something that simply needs to be protected by me? Because those are very different intentions, and one of them keeps your peace intact, while the other slowly hands it over. And once you understand that, you stop being someone who displays their calm and start becoming someone who quietly lives it without needing anyone else to see it. You've probably noticed a pattern by now. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you choose not to reveal. Your plans, your weaknesses, your reactions, your limits, your past, your next move, even your peace. Each of these holds power. And the moment they're shared without intention, that power begins to fade. This isn't about becoming distant or closed off. It's about becoming intentional, because not everything needs to be explained. Not everyone needs access, and not every thought or feeling deserves to be spoken out loud. If there's one thing to take from this, it's simple. Start paying attention to what you reveal and why. Pause before you speak. Observe before you react. Choose what you share instead of giving it away. That's where real control begins. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on just one area where you tend to overshare and start there. Small changes, repeated daily, create a completely different version of you over time. Thanks for being here and staying through to the end. I'll see you in the next video.